Flash running in the foreground and the background zooming past. So for the TV show, they most likely used a motion control rig, which is a giant robot arm. I'm going to show you how I gave my friend the Flash's super speed using visual effects. Hey guys, Cameron here. Welcome back to Cam's Corner. In this week's video, I'm going to show you how I gave my friend the Flash's super speed using visual effects. These effects I'm about to break down were for a YouTube short I made a couple years ago called If I Had Super Speed Like the Flash. If you want to check out the finished short, you can click the link right here or in the description below. So there are many fantastic The Flash VFX tutorials on YouTube already. So for this video, I decided to break down 3 specific effects that I did that I had a lot of fun creating, and also I have not seen other VFX artists break down before. Now, let's jump into effect number 1. So the first shot is a very classic The Flash shot. It is a medium wide shot of the Flash running in the foreground and the background zooming past in a blur. I was watching a VFX breakdown for the Flash TV show. The way they usually do it is they would film the actor Grant Gustin against a green screen while running on a treadmill. And then they would add the background in post. Usually it's a full CG city that they created. So for this project, I did not have the resources that the TV show had, so I had to come up with a low budget version of it. So for my version of the effect, I required 2 video plates. Plate number 1 is a shot of my friend Peter running against a green screen. Instead of a fancy green screen studio, I set up a foldable green screen behind Peter in my living room, and we had the windows opened wide so that sunlight could come in. We also did not have a treadmill, so I had Peter run in place instead. However, it is tricky to make a person running in place look like they're running for real. From an earlier short I did inspired by The Flash, I filmed myself against green screen just running in place and jogging in place, hopping up and down, but that turned out not to look very realistic because you could tell that I was just jogging in place and not moving. So for this video, I actually was inspired by a TikToker called Salt Poppy, who had a couple of viral videos of himself running in place, but it looked like he was actually running, but it turned out to be an optical illusion. So what he did was that he would be standing in one spot, swinging one leg back and forth in a running motion, while the other leg would be bent and would bob up and down. And if the camera framing cuts him off below the knees, it actually looks like he's running for real. So when we were filming, I directed Peter to basically do the Salt Poppy run and create the optical illusion. So for the second plate, we had to get the background, the blurry background that would emphasize the speed of the Flash. A few months before filming this video, I actually purchased a DJI Ronin S gimbal. So what I did to capture the background plate was I put my camera on the gimbal. I went outside of my apartment on a nearby sidewalk, and I ran from one end of the sidewalk all the way to the end of the block. I chose a sidewalk that had very little foot traffic, so there would not be any other people around. Now that we had the 2 video plates, it was time to composite them together in After Effects. So step 1 of the compositing process was to key out the green screen behind Peter and then place the background video plate behind him. Then I sped up the background footage by about 10 times, and I also sped up Peter's running plate by about 2 times. This wasn't a very scientific process, it was more so just gauging by my eyes what I thought would look right. Then I added artificial motion blur on both the background plate and Peter's plate. The motion blur helped sell the illusion that the footage was shot in real time, even though it was sped up. On top of the motion blur that I added for the background, I also added a directional blur to emphasize the speed in which the Flash was going even more. The next step of compositing was to make sure that the 2 plates' colors and lighting matched. The trick I used to match the colors of different plates is to go in through every color channel, the reds, the greens, and the blues, and match the black-white contrast on each of those channels. And then, because in the background plate, we are sometimes in sunlight, and sometimes we go under a tree and go into shade and then back into sunlight, the exposure is constantly changing. In order to simulate that on the plate of Peter, which the light is consistent, I used the curves tool to keyframe animate the exposure to match the background plate. So whenever we were under shade, the plate of Peter would darken, and then when we returned to sunlight, the plate of Peter would brighten. And now the last step is to add the signature, the Flash's lightning streaks behind Peter. So for this effect, I used the advanced lightning plugin that comes with After Effects. I chose the bouncy lightning type and toggled keyframes for the conductivity state so that it changed from the beginning of the shot to the end of the shot. And that causes the lightning to randomize so it has the chaotic nature of how lightning would behave. Then I added some glow on top, and then everything combined, the shot looked pretty good. So that's how you can do the shot from the Flash TV show, but in a much more low budget way. Now let's move on to effect number 2. So this effect is directly inspired by several shots from the Flash TV show, where Barry is running around the forensics lab at the police station or at Star Lab, frantically flipping through books and then doing experiments, and the camera is rotating around him. For the TV show, they most likely used a motion control rig, which is a giant robot arm that you can program and have it move at specific speeds and also replicate the same movement over and over again. A robot arm like that costs probably over $100,000, and we did not have access to one. Once again, I did a low budget version of this effect. What I did was that I had a camera slider set up on 2 light stands, and then I would manually move the camera from one end to the other end. And I tried to move the camera as smoothly and at as consistent of a speed as I could. Then I just directed Peter to act out the scene in normal motion. He did not have to speed up or anything. He could just act out the scene in normal speed. But as my camera was coming towards the end of the slider, then I would direct him to basically finish up studying and finish up his essay and send it. And then it was time to take the shot we filmed into After Effects. First thing I did, I sped up the footage again, about 10 times as well. I added the warp stabilizer effect to smooth out the shot even more and remove any of the jerkiness or the unevenness of me operating the camera. And then I added digital motion blur on top. So once again, this held the illusion that we're filming in real time, even though we actually did speed up the footage. And so, even though we didn't have a robot arm, this shot actually looked pretty good. And the next step, once again, was to add the Flash's lightning effects. So for this one, I actually experimented a little bit. I tried a few different ways to create the lightning. I tried out the different lightning plugins that were within After Effects itself. I tried out the Saber plugin from Video Copilot. But what I ended up settling on were these great stock footage elements by this wonderful YouTube channel called Film Learning. If you haven't heard of Film Learning before, I'll put his channel link in the description below. He has a bunch of wonderful tutorials that you should check out. So the stock footage elements were designed for a shot where a person is running past frame or leaving frame. So I wasn't sure they were gonna work at first. But then looking over the shot of Peter studying, he actually zooms across frame several times of like going from one book to another book and back to the computer. So I added the effects on top and they actually worked super well. Then all I needed to do was add some glow and then the shot looks great. And there you have an effect of Peter doing homework at super speed. And now, effect number 3. This shot I call the cam exploding shot. So this effect actually is not inspired by The Flash, but actually a scene from the TV show, The Boys. Slight spoilers for the show, this happens in episode 1 of the whole series. A character is exploded when a Flash-like speedster runs through her. It's a very graphic scene and demonstrates how dangerous it is actually if a Flash-like character were to run past or run through a person. For the effect they had in the TV show, they had really cool but complicated liquid simulations of blood and guts flying everywhere. And I am not a very experienced CG artist. Also, I did not have time to render out such a complicated sequence. So I went with, once again, a more low budget, simpler version of this. So for this effect, I required 2 video plates. Plate number 1 was me talking on the phone and just standing there. And plate number 2 was a shot of Peter running into frame and then stopping and then looking back and reacting to the carnage he just caused. Also in plate number 2, as Peter runs in and stops, right when he stops, I'm off camera, I took off my shoes and I throw my shoes into frame. So that is to sell that when I exploded, my shoes flew off and then rolled across the ground. So then I took the 2 shots into After Effects and composited them together. So I start out with plate number 1 of just me talking on the phone. And then when Peter zooms in, once Peter is past where my character was, I freeze frame and do a 2D mass cutout of my character. And then on the 2D freeze frame cutout of myself, I added 2 effects. I added the CC pixel poly effect, which essentially shatters the image and then scatters it. Then on top of that, I added the roughen edges effect and chose red as the edge color to sell the idea that it's like body chunks and meat and guts flying out. Then I used CC Force Motion Blur to add digital motion blur on top of it so that it would look more realistic. In the next step, I took several high quality blood effects from Action VFX. That included several blood bursts, blood squirts, and then blood splatters, which would be added to the ground. So once Peter ran through where I was, it becomes basically a shattered version of myself, and then a bunch of blood, and then once the blood explodes, it splatters the blood all across the ground. And as Peter ran past me, I made sure to add a lightning trail effect, and once again, these were stock elements from Film Learning. And there you have it. There's a simple effect inspired by The Boys where a speedster runs through a person and they explode into blood and guts. That's it for this week's video. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you found it educational and insightful in some way. Let me know if there are any other visual effects you would like me to break down. Also, if you apply any of the super speed effects you learned from this video to any of your projects, please send them my way. I would love to check them out. I'll see you next week breaking down another creative process. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.